Speak now to Mark Regev, an advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister and also a former Israeli ambassador to the UK. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. I'll talk to you, if I may, about what Mr. Lazzarini had to say in a moment. On this issue of Al-Shifa Hospital, and you're saying effectively that it's a Hamas command and control centre or something very similar. Are you suggesting, therefore, that it could become, the hospital could become a legitimate target?
I think we just want to say the truth, and we've known this for a fact, and we're now sharing it widely with the world. This is Hamas, and you shouldn't be surprised. We've seen the sort of brutality Hamas is capable of committing. We saw the murders, the rapes, the massacres, the beheadings, the burning of people alive. Are you really surprised that they would use a humanitarian site like a hospital for their command and control?
Do you intend to ask that the hospital be evacuated? Because that would be virtually impossible. I mean, for a start, where on earth would the patients go?
So, first of all, we haven't made such a request yet, but we want people to know what Hamas is doing. In the past, there have been documented cases of them storing missiles in UN facilities, of shooting out of mosques. No one should be surprised that they have no qualms whatsoever about turning a hospital into a military target. That's their responsibility.
We just heard from a doctor at the Al-Shifa saying it would be unjustifiable to even talk about an attack on that hospital. It would be a war crime, in the words of the doctor.
So if I can answer that, Mark, the first thing, you know that everyone you interview in Gaza, it's not a democratic society. It's run by an authoritarian extremist terrorist group, and people who speak out of turn face consequences, often violent consequences. So you know that he can't say that he knows Hamas is there and that Hamas is endangering his hospital. If he did so, he'd be in trouble, and his family could well place also be in trouble. And that has to be understood.
Yeah, but it could also be a doctor speaking out in protection and concern for his patients.
But your viewers, Mark, your viewers have to know, can that doctor criticize Hamas? Even the UN has trouble criticizing Hamas because they have to work in Gaza. This is a violent, extreme group. If that doctor knows, as we do, that Hamas has built a headquarters at the basement of his hospital, can he say so to Sky? Of course he cannot. Some common sense. They live in a brutal, authoritarian regime that has no qualms about killing innocent people. We know that. You know that.
Let me put to you what Philippe Lazzarini had to say. He said the UN is very close to a cessation of activities in Gaza, already rationing supplies to hospitals, water stations. The last remaining public services are collapsing. They're on the brink of a serious outbreak of disease, sewage, water in the street. It will contribute to more people dying. He says you are simply punishing the people of Gaza.
What will contribute to more people dying is if we don't thoroughly defeat Hamas, and that's what we have to do. And ultimately defeating Hamas will be good, not only for the Israeli population, who will be safer and not have to live next to this terrorist enclave, but it'll be better for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this bunch of cutthroats that currently run the Gaza Strip. Surely they deserve better.
But he is saying that effectively it amounts to collective punishment, which is a breach of international law, a clear breach of international law, laying siege to a civilian population.
That's clearly not true. I don't know who he's quoting, but in all sorts of armed conflicts I'll explain. Let me answer.
Which part is not true?
Because in all armed conflicts that you have covered, I'm sure, there have been blockades imposed. Well, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a blockade imposed. Going back to the Iraq War, a blockade was imposed. Sanctions are an integral part of international law. If we don't have the right to impose economic sanctions on the Gaza Strip in self-defense, other countries do it. Israel can do it too. Economic blockades, economic sanctions are a legitimate part, a legitimate tool in a case of warfare.
His point is that it is an indiscriminate blockade in the sense that when you
oppose sanctions on Japan or on China or Korea, it's not innocent people. When there were sanctions on South Africa, once again, are you holding Israel to a standard?
We're talking. No.
But you're telling me it's against international law.
Gaza.
No, but you're telling me it's against international law.
To lay siege to a civilian population is against international law. But listen, I want to get on to the detail, if I could, about what he said to me. He said he is saying they need access to fuel at the border. There is fuel at the border. He says for that they need a pause in the airstrikes and authorization from Israel that it will be safe to move that fuel. In other words, deconfliction is what he's after. Will you give that undertaking?
No, I'd say the following to him. I noticed in his entire interview, he didn't once criticize Hamas for storing the fuel and not sharing it with the people of Gaza. Fuel that was meant for the people of Gaza, that has been hijacked and stolen by Hamas. We know it's there, but of course I understand he works there. He needs to work there. It's a terrible authoritarian regime. Believe me, when this is over, the UN will have a much easier time of working because they won't have to work in the framework of this terrible Hamas regime.
But what is wrong with a pause in the airstrikes to get... They need 160,000 litres of fuel a day. They're nowhere near that, Mr. Regev. What is wrong
we
with
estimate there's over half a million.
There's over half a million to get that in.
There's over 500,000 tons of oil today, litres of oil, sorry, in the Gaza Strip today. And of course, Hamas wants.
If they need, no, well, hang on a minute. If they need 160,000 litres of oil a day to keep the hospitals going and so forth, you say there's a 500,000 litres there.
I said over.
That's not
over 500,000.
That's about 2 or 3. But that's about 2 or 3 days worth.
So at least Hamas should be supplying the oil instead of taking it for its own military machine. They've stolen it from the people of Gaza. The oil is in Gaza. The fuel is there. Hamas has stolen it. Is that Israel's fault?
Let me give you the last point he made, if I may, just finally. He says more people in Gaza will now feel abandoned by the international community, and that will take years, maybe a generation, he says, to heal, and that is not the recipe for future peace in the region. And he has a very good point there, doesn't he, that you could be storing up more trouble for yourself going forward.
I think the people of Gaza will feel abandoned if the international community continues to allow them to live under this brutal, authoritarian, theocratic dictatorship, which doesn't care a hoot about the people of Gaza. They deserve better. The international community should be joining us in the call for that regime to end. We will destroy Hamas. It'll be better for us. It'll be better for the Gazans too.
Okay, Mark Regev, thank you for coming on the programme this evening.
My pleasure.
Much more.